His hands shook as he reached for my seatbelt, faster than mine could find it. The soft click got lost under the sound of my back hitting the cold car seat. We were squeezed into the narrow back of his old Chevy, windows fogging up so fast the streetlight outside looked like spilled paint. Rain pounded the roof like angry fists, and the smell of wet road crept through a crack in the window. He had one knee on the floor, the other pressed against the door to keep steady. His shoulders were wide enough to fill the small space. I grabbed his jacket and pulled him down, feeling his weight settle over me hot, solid, and scary in how much I needed it. My hands trembled when they moved below his belt. The heat of him shocked me, made me gasp so loud he froze for a second. I thought he might stop, but his breath came out shaky against my ear. "You sure?" he whispered. I nodded, too breathless to speak, my fingers wrapping around something that seemed too big for either of our rushed hopes. Water dripped from the roof onto my cheek, mixing with the salty sting of my nerves. He shifted, the old car springs squeaking, rough fabric scraping my legs. His forehead pressed against mine, skin damp, breath tasting like coffee and fear. Every breath smelled of warm engine and the sharp scent of rain-soaked leather. My heart pounded so loud I worried someone outside would hear it and know exactly what we were doing. I never thought I'd cross this line, not at 38, not after crawling through a divorce that left me broken, counting my pills like small victories. He was Marcus Stone, 46, my ex-husband's mechanic, and once a reliable friend over cheap coffee. 2 months ago, he fixed my car's electrical system and asked how I was holding up. I burst into tears right there between the work bays. He didn't judge, just wiped grease on a cloth and listened. Kindness became routine late-night texts about car troubles that were really check-ins, slow drives after therapy sessions, roadside burger stops where we shared milkshakes I used to drink alone. Somewhere in those miles, he stopped feeling like just help and started feeling like a heartbeat I'd lost. Now his rough hands slid under my sweater, meeting soft skin. I sucked in air, chest rising to meet him. He hesitated, then lowered his lips to brush the hollow of my throat. The inside light stayed off, but the dashboard glowed faint green enough to see his jaw tight with control. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto my collarbone, a cold shock followed by the steady warmth of his mouth. I gripped his shoulders, nails scraping canvas. He made a sharp sound, hips moving not from pain, but from everything he'd held back during weeks of careful silence. Our knees bumped the gear shift. A car horn honked a block away, making us freeze. He held me tight, heartbeat drumming hard enough to shake the small world of his car. The streetlight flickered, shadows crawling across fog-covered glass. I felt his hardness, unmistakable and urgent, pressing against the inside of my thigh. Another gasp slipped out, half fear, half wonder that he wanted me this much when I'd spent years feeling like forgotten furniture. I tipped my head back against the window, cold glass cooling the sweat at my neck. His hand moved lower, slow and careful, like every inch of me was both delicate and on fire. I heard myself whisper that I needed to feel something real. His answer was a quiet groan, lips searching my jawline. The car smelled of motor oil, pine air freshener, and the sharp scent of skin just starting to sweat. Window glass rattled under rain gusts. His hands pushed my skirt higher, fingertips trembling on the backs of my knees. My breath caught when he lifted my leg over his hip. The seatbelts hung loose, metal pieces tapping plastic in a nervous rhythm. He pressed forward hot, heavy pressure, and I felt all the months of careful grief crack wide open. What would you do if the only person who made you feel whole again was the one you should never have touched? The question pulsed behind my closed eyes, louder than thunder. I was a woman rebuilt from broken pieces, chasing life in the dark, and he was the wrong salvation at the perfect time. He said my name like a warning and a plea. I answered by pulling him closer, sweater making our movements clumsy, breath steaming the cramped air. The first slow push stole sound from both our throats. Vinyl squeaked, slick with rainwater from his jeans. My hand slipped under his shirt, finding warm skin and the hard ridges of muscle earned from turning wrenches. He shivered. I thought absurdly that the car might rock enough to set off its own alarm, but the only alarm was the wild beat under my ribs. Feeling mixed with memory, the numb nights after the divorce, waking to a house that echoed with everything missing, swallowing pills dry because water felt pointless. And now this raw weight, real heat, the desperate rhythm of two people trying to claw life back through each other's skin. My eyes burned. I blinked rain off my lashes and realized it was tears. He kissed them away without comment, movement steadier than his breathing. Outside, the storm calmed to a whisper. Inside, our breathing filled the silence, rough and uneven. Every movement strained denim seams, rubber floor mats sliding under boots. Something inside me shifted, maybe cracked like a bone finally healing wrong. I knew consequences were waiting outside, but right then his body over mine felt like the first clear thought after months of static. When release hit, it was quiet but earth-shaking, a rush that left both of us trembling. He braced a hand on the window beside my head, breathing hard while I swallowed sobs that were equal parts relief and dread. The windshield cleared in a silent sweep as the defroster kicked on. Outside, traffic lights still changed for a street that hadn't noticed us parked under its humming glow. He didn't move right away, his forehead staying against mine, both of us catching breath while cooling air touched our sweat. My skirt fell crooked over one thigh. His belt hung open, metal clasp gleaming red from a distant taillight's reflection. I felt his chest rise and fall against me, steadying, real. Somewhere a dog barked, reminding me that ordinary life still existed beyond the fogged glass. Ordinary would demand answers I didn't have. He finally whispered, "Tell me this isn't just about surviving." My voice shook. I can't. The truth felt heavy and simple. I had crossed a line, and it might be the only thing that made sense. If you've ever risked everything just to feel human again, this story might hit too close. Please like and subscribe. Watching helps these stories reach others who need them. Marcus drove me home that night in silence, hands steady on the wheel while my pulse bounced everywhere the headlights touched. He parked a safe half-block away so the neighbors wouldn't see, then walked me to the porch with his jacket hood low over his eyes. We didn't kiss goodbye. We just stood under the drooping roof edge, rainwater dripping from the gutter into the flower bed I'd let die after the divorce. He brushed my cheek once, barely a touch, then turned and left. When the taillights vanished, the quiet pressed in until I could hear the clock in the front hall ticking like it was counting down to something I couldn't name. Inside, the house smelled of leftover soup and lemon cleaner. I leaned against the door, boots still on, replaying every gasp from the back seat until shame curled hot in my stomach. I switched on the TV just for noise, some late-night reruns spilling canned laughter across the living room. But the glow only threw deeper shadows around the empty armchair where my ex used to watch ball games. In that dim light, the silence felt like a weight in my throat. I went to the kitchen for water and caught my reflection in the dark window, mascara smudged, sweater stretched, hair matted flat where his palm had pressed my head to the seat. I looked like someone who'd climbed out of a wreck, still shaking with disbelief she survived. 6 months earlier, the wreck had been legal, not metal. My ex-husband Ryan walked out during breakfast because he'd found clarity with a coworker who quoted self-help podcasts. 20 minutes after he closed the door, the garbage truck rolled up, and I realized I hadn't dragged the bin out. I sat on the curb in my bathrobe, sobbing while the driver apologized for protocol. I didn't eat solid food for 3 days. Bills piled up. The dog stopped sleeping through the night, and I filled pill bottles with tiny white attempts at calm. By autumn, my therapist suggested a hobby that forced me outside. I chose jogging, but mostly walked the loop behind the strip mall, packing the same cracked pavement where Marcus's shop backs onto the alley. The first evening I passed his bay, he yelled over the whine of a power tool, looking strong. It wasn't flirtation, just a neighborly nod, but my chest tightened like he'd handed me oxygen. The next week he offered bottled water. Week 3, he leaned on the workbench and listened while I rambled about how betrayal feels like smoke poisoning, no visible wounds, but every breath hurts. He never offered empty phrases, only nodded, eyes steady but soft. I started timing my jogs for when his shift wound down, pretending curiosity about car parts and engine belts, just to hear him explain things in that slow, gravel-warm voice. By November, I'd gotten used to his texts. Need a lift at 11 p.m. when my car wouldn't start. You eat yet? When he suspected I hadn't. He drove me to thrift stores for cheap furniture after Ryan took the good couch. One rainy Saturday, we rearranged my garage, toppling musty boxes while wind rattled the door. Dust hung in flashlight beams like memory itself. I found the wedding punch bowls still wrapped in tissue. Before tears could rise, he'd steered the conversation to old rock songs, humming off-key until grief eased enough for me to laugh. We weren't careful with time. Sunday afternoons blurred into evenings as we sorted shelves, always keeping a practical excuse between us: oil change, loose hinge, shared ride, handshake distance, but boundaries slipped. One night I stood on a stool changing a bulb. He steadied my waist, brushing bare skin under my shirt. I sucked air so fast the bulb shattered in my grip. Tiny pieces tinkled onto the workbench. He lowered me slowly, neither of us bleeding but both shaken by what almost happened and by how badly we wanted it to. That was the night he told me about his own breaks, a brother lost to drugs, a first marriage that drowned in silence. We sat in lawn chairs, headlights from passing cars sliding across boxes like slow search lights. He admitted some mornings he couldn't face the shop unless he heard from me. I confessed I saved his voice messages just to hear them help me sleep. Every truth we shared felt like a brick we pulled from a wall that used to protect us, until we noticed the whole structure leaning, ready to fall the next time we touched it. After weeks of walking that line, the backseat storm happened almost by accident. I'd called him from the roadside after therapy. My spare tire had shredded itself to ribbons. He showed up soaked, muscles jumping under flannel that clung like a second skin. He changed the tire while lightning flashed over the refinery stacks, then insisted I wait in his car so the wind wouldn't cut through my coat. The moment the doors shut, the temperature wasn't what threatened me. It was the nearness, the smell of rain in his hair, the way my own name sounded different in his mouth when he asked if I was okay. We crossed every line before we thought to measure it. Now, back in my living room, I realized kindness had become temptation, and temptation had started to hurt. In the TV glow, I traced the crease where his body had pressed my skirt, skin still tingling like it wanted to call him back. I typed out a message, "You home safe," then deleted it. I tried water, then tea, then shower steam, but nothing quieted the buzz under my ribs. Around 2 a.m., I found his jacket scent still on my palms. The gasoline leather mix sent a jolt of want so strong I pressed my hands to the countertop to keep from texting. 2 days later, I caught him under my kitchen sink fixing a slow leak. The afternoon sun slanted through blinds, stripping his shoulders gold. He twisted the wrench and looked up to say something routine, probably about the pipe fitting, but the words jammed between us. My hip bumped the cabinet, knocking loose a sponge. We both reached. Fingers brushed. His jaw tightened. Mine slackened. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and copper pipe. He whispered, "We can't." I whispered, "I know." But neither of us stepped back. The silence swelled until the fridge motor kicked on, startling us apart like guilty kids. That pattern became our normal. He'd stand behind me in the garage, salt and motor oil on his hands, guiding me how to loosen a rusted bolt. My pulse would stutter. He'd swallow hard. We'd trade half-smiles that hurt more than full kisses. I started counting minutes between our innocent tasks, noticing how my body blamed him for every skipped heartbeat. He stopped finishing sentences, afraid they'd tip into confessions. Even polite words, "pass the wrench," "need a lift," felt charged, carrying hidden meaning no polite language could cage. Late evenings found me curled on the couch, TV volume low while rain ticked at the window, and the ghost of his seatbelt buckle clicked in my mind. I'd scroll photos of sunsets he sent from the shop lot, pretending they were just friendly updates. He'd text me lists of songs the radio played while he closed up, adding, "Thought you'd like this one," like an apology for wanting me to hear them first. We spoke in half-coded messages that looked harmless to anyone else, but pulsed with things we couldn't say aloud. One night, he drove my beat-up car home after an oil change. I followed in his truck. He parked in my gravel drive, engine still running, and stared into the rearview like he was memorizing a goodbye. I stood on the porch holding the key he'd left in the ignition, watching headlights roll across his windshield as neighbors turned onto the street. He didn't get out, I didn't wave, but my heart pounded so loudly the porch boards seemed to vibrate. When he finally pulled away, I exhaled like I'd been underwater. I knew then whatever had cracked open in the back of his car wasn't going to seal. It was either going to break us further or break us free, and I wasn't sure which terrified me more. Marcus started stopping by after his shifts under the excuse of checking the water heater, though we both knew he'd already replaced the failing part. He'd arrive around 9, steel-toed boots tracking dust across my clean floor, toolbox rattling with wrenches he rarely opened. I'd brew supermarket coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in, and we'd sit at opposite ends of the kitchen table like weary teammates, steam curling between us. Conversation always began with easy things: tire pressure, the price of brake pads, but drifted to heavier weight before either of us caught it. One night, I admitted I still slept on only one side of the bed because the empty half felt like an accusation. He winced like the words left a bruise on him too, then said he hadn't used his dining table since his divorce meals tasted wrong without another chair scraped out. We traded these small confessions the way war veterans swapped scars, grim curiosity, equal respect. There were long silences when the house fan clicked on and the fridge motor sighed, but those pauses felt thick, not awkward. I'd trace the rim of my mug. He'd tap a calloused finger in time with some tune stuck in his head. The distance across the table felt shorter each time. He grew comfortable opening my cupboards to hunt sugar, sliding past me so close I felt body heat even through our hoodies. Once he reached over my shoulder for a glass, and his chest grazed my back. We both froze. The gulp I swallowed was louder than the clink of glass on the counter. He whispered, "Sorry," so softly I almost missed it, but his hand lingered an extra heartbeat on the cabinet door before he stepped away. Rainy Saturdays became our unofficial projects, clearing attic boxes, replacing porch boards, fixing hinges that squeaked. Working side by side meant accidental touches, the brush of elbows passing on the ladder, his palm steadying my shoulder as I reached for tape. Each contact set off a pulse that lasted long after the hammering stopped. Sometimes we'd pause to stretch sore backs, standing amid sawdust moats hanging in sunlight like faint ghosts. I'd catch him studying me, jaw tight as if trying to decide whether to speak or bite back the urge. He always looked away first, but the heat in his eyes hung in the air like a held breath. We began texting while rooms apart in the same house. "Need help with this hinge?" or "coffee?" because words spoken aloud felt too loud for what pulsed under them. One evening, I found a smiley face drawn in pencil on the inside of a cabinet he'd repaired. I traced it with trembling fingers, weirdly touched by the secret, childish mark left just for me. Our jokes grew private shorthand for things we were afraid to name. When I flashed a new set of drill bits like they were diamonds, he laughed, "Look at you, fancy." And my cheeks warmed because the praise sounded intimate. He started leaving old rock records on my doorstep with notes. "Play track 3 when you miss sunlight." I'd text "thank you" with a photo of the record spinning, sunlight reflecting off dusty grooves, and he'd reply with a single heart I told myself was harmless. But harmless kept slipping. One Wednesday, I woke from a nightmare Ryan standing in the doorway saying he never loved me, and sent Marcus a shaky 1 a.m. message. "You awake?" He called seconds later, voice gravelly with sleep but steady. He listened while I stuttered through tears. I didn't understand. "It's okay," he said. "Dreams can't hurt you." "They do," I whispered. He exhaled like he wished he could climb through the phone. 15 minutes later, his truck idled outside, engine ticking. He never came in, just sat on the curb until dawn, texted me updates about the weather. Seeing his taillights still there through the blinds calmed me more than any pill. Daylight blurred the lines again. At the farmer's market, he lifted peach boxes into my trunk, forearms flexing. I thanked him. He said, "Anything for you." My chest tightened at the casual claim. A vendor gave us a knowing grin, assuming we were a couple. I laughed too loud, insisting just friends, but her smile said she didn't buy it. And the thrill of being mistaken rattled me all afternoon. In the garage one humid afternoon, we organized tools while cicadas screamed outside. Sweat darkened his collar. Stray engine grease smudged his cheek. I dipped a cloth in solvent and wiped the mark without thinking. His eyes locked on mine, surprise flicking to something hotter. The cloth fell from my hand. He reached up, thumb brushing a strand of hair off my forehead. Time hiccuped. I smelled solvent, cedar, his skin. Then the garage door shook in the wind, snapping us apart. He stepped back, muttered, "We should finish." Voice shot through with gravel. We worked the next hour barely talking, but every clang of metal felt like a heartbeat. Evenings grew dangerous. We'd finish chores, then linger in the hallway where lights were low. One night the bulb over the stair landing burned out. Darkness swallowed us mid-conversation. I felt his hand hover near my waist in the gloom. He whispered, "You okay?" Breathless, I whispered back, "Yeah." Neither of us moved. A car door slammed outside, my neighbor getting home late, and the beam of her headlights slashed through the stair window, illuminating us standing 6 inches apart, lips parted, eyes wide. The light vanished, leaving us more exposed in memory than darkness ever could. He stopped by fewer times after that, claiming long shifts, but his truck still drove slow past my street some nights, tailpipe rattling like a guilty secret. I'd watch from behind curtains, pulse knocking, wondering if he wanted me to see him, if I wanted him to stop. The almost moment that nearly broke us came in the kitchen on a cold Monday. I was chopping onions. He hovered by the stove, fixing the loose knob. The radio played some blues guitar, low and gritty. Onion fumes burned my eyes. Maybe that's why I didn't step back when his arm slid around to steady the cutting board. His chest brushed my shoulder blade, solid heat seeping through flannel. I paused mid-slice, knife suspended. He didn't speak. I felt the rhythm of his breathing change slower, deeper. The song's bass line throbbed under fluorescent hum. Onion tears blurred my vision. I blinked, and a hot tear slid down my cheek. He wiped it with a thumb, hand trembling. My own breath hitched. The air smelled of spice, sweat, sharpened steel. We stood locked like that, me holding a knife, him holding my face, so close the stove light glinted off his eyelashes. He whispered, "This is bad." I whispered back, "Feels right." For one heartbeat, I thought he'd kiss me right there, knives and onions be damned. His lips parted. The timer on the oven shrilled, pitching us apart. The knife clattered into the sink. He stepped back, chest heaving. I turned off the timer with shaking fingers. Neither of us spoke. The blues guitar wobbled a lonely note that sounded like something breaking. He grabbed his toolbox, muttered tomorrow, maybe, and left through the back door. I leaned against the counter, chest hollow, realizing tomorrow was already crowding the doorway. The trigger came from a number I should have deleted 100 times, Ryan asking if I'd consider selling the house while the market's decent, as though 4 walls that held every echo of our past were just another asset to cash in. He spoke politely, voice smooth with self-help serenity, listing benefits and dollar signs. I said I'd think about it, hung up, and immediately tasted bile. The kitchen spun. I grabbed the counter, breath ragged, onion scent still trapped in the cutting board from yesterday's near disaster. For 10 long minutes I stood there shaking, heading how a single conversation could peel me back to raw nerve. Then I did the thing I had promised myself not to do. I texted Marcus, "Need you now." No explanation, no emoji. The reply came before my pulse slowed. "On my way." Rain started again while I paced the living room, gray afternoon blurring the street outside. Thunder rumbled low, making the window panes tremble. I couldn't sit. I tried arranging couch cushions, wiping non-existent dust from picture frames, anything to hide how badly I needed him to pull me back from the edge. A car door slammed. I froze, hand on a photograph of my wedding day. I put it face down and went to the front door. Marcus stood on the porch, soaked, breath fogging in the chill air. No toolbox, no pretext, just him, shoulders hunched under flannel already dark with water, eyes searching my face like a man checking for injuries after a crash. "What happened?" he asked. "My life," I said, voice cracking. Come in." He stepped across the threshold. I closed the door behind him. Rain hammered the siding, wind rattling the storm window. The hallway light was on, warm, almost gentle, but everything else felt sharp. He peeled off his jacket, water dripping onto the mat. I reached to hang it, but my fingers missed the hook and it thudded to the floor. He caught my wrist before I could pick it up. "Talk to me," he whispered. I tried, words jammed, eyes burned. He pulled me closer, hands warm on my arms. The smell of rain and engine oil wrapped around me like a blanket and a warning. My chest hitched. His thumb rubbed small circles on my sleeve. Heat pooled in my throat, and suddenly I was sobbing against his shoulder, grief shaking loose with every breath. He held me silent, except for a rough exhale each time thunder cracked overhead. "I'm so tired," I mumbled into his shirt. "Tired of starting over, tired of empty rooms." He drew back just enough to see my face. "You're not empty." I laughed, a broken sound. "You don't know." He cupped my cheek, calloused palm warm, thumb brushing tear tracks. "I know what it feels like to think the hurt is all that's left." His voice sounded like gravel rolled in honey, soft but unflinching. "But when I'm with you, the hurt quiets down." Lightning flashed, brightening the entryway like a camera shutter. In that stark light, I saw every line of fatigue on his face, every drop of rain clinging to his hair, and the fierce tenderness in his eyes that scared me more than any desire. "I'm not good for you," I whispered. "Maybe," he said, stepping closer until our knees touched. "But you're the only thing that feels good for me right now." The distance evaporated. His lips brushed mine, one hesitant pass, tasting of rain and restraint. My breath caught. He pulled back a fraction, searching my eyes for permission he already had. I reached for him, fingers fisting the damp fabric at his chest, and the second kiss came harder, mouths opening, breath mingling hot in the cool hall air. Some part of my brain cataloged details. The soft squeak of wet soles on tile when I backed him against the wall, the way the hallway lamp cast a gold halo on the crown of his head, how his hands spread at my lower back, thumbs pressing gentle but firm, as if anchoring me to the only steady thing in the room. Thunder boomed again, closer, and rain pelted the roof in waves that sounded like surf. Each gust of wind made the door rattle, a reminder the world was inches away. But inside this sliver of space, the world had narrowed to skin and heartbeat. He murmured my name, voice ragged. I answered by tugging the hem of his t-shirt free. The fabric clung to rain-damp skin. I pushed it upward, palms skimming heat beneath. He inhaled sharply when my fingertips traced the scar on his ribs, a souvenir from a motorcycle wipeout he'd once joked about. I flattened my palm over it, feeling the uneven ridge, and something in me ached fierce and protective. His hand slipped under my sweater, calluses catching on lace. I shivered, not from cold. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against my temple. I shook my head. "Don't." He groaned, deep and rough, and pulled me tighter. My back hit the front door with a soft thud. Keys jangled on the hook. He pressed flush, heat forging through damp layers. I felt the hard line of him, larger than memory, and a shocked gasp left my throat, same sound as in the car, raw and unfiltered. He muttered an apology, but I curled my leg around his calf, urging closer. Vinyl tile was cold under my bare feet. His body was furnace hot everywhere we touched. The contrast branded new nerve endings awake. His fingers found the waistband of my leggings, hesitation trembling through them. I nodded, breathless, and he slid fabric down just enough for skin to meet skin. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth carried in on his clothes, mixed with the faint citrus of my detergent. Each inhalation tasted new. He braced a forearm beside my head, other hand at my hip, steadying both of us as he eased forward. The first slow push drew a choked sound from my throat, half relief, half disbelief that anything could feel this necessary. We moved cautiously at first, like learning a language with no common words, then faster when caution gave way to need. Rain drummed steady, masking the rustle of clothing, the soft slap of bodies seeking refuge in each other. My nails bit the back of his neck. He hissed, kissed the hinge of my jaw, sweat slicked under my sweater. The hallway lamp buzzed once, threatening to burn out. Each thrust pushed a picture frame against the wall, its tiny tapping keeping time with our rhythm. He pressed his forehead to mine, eyes squeezed shut. I shouldn't want this so bad. I do, I breathed and felt him shiver. When release came, it was silent but seismic, a flood of heat and relief that left us clinging, trembling, foreheads touching, breath mingling. The storm outside eased to a patter like applause fading in a vast theater. Inside, our pulses slowed in ragged unison. He didn't pull away right away. His thumb stroked my cheek, tender in the dimming light. My legs trembled where they wrapped his waist. He steadied me, whispering, "Easy." I realized tears tracked my face again, no sobs, just overflow. He kissed them, murmuring broken comforts. Finally he eased back, helped tug my leggings up, smoothed my hair with shaking fingers. We stood inches apart, door at my back, his eyes searching mine with a mess of fear and belonging. "This changes everything," he said. Lightning flickered far off now, silent. I swallowed. Maybe everything needed changing. He exhaled a shaky laugh. "You'll wreck me, you know." "Already wrecked," I whispered. He kissed my forehead, lingered, then stepped away, running a hand through damp hair like he needed distance to breathe. The hallway felt wider, colder. I leaned on the door, weak, listening to the soft drip of storm water off the eaves. In the quiet, guilt stirred slow, insistent. But it rode tandem with a startling sense of being knit back together, however briefly, by the very person who might unspool me tomorrow. I slept less than an hour that night. Every time my eyelids flickered shut, I felt the echo of his body pinning mine against the door, heard the ticking picture frame like it was still keeping tempo. By dawn, the house was silent against storm clouds blown east, gutters dripping into the flower bed. I watched the sun slice a thin blade of light across the bedroom ceiling and braced for the usual emptiness. Instead, a new weight settled inside me. The knowledge that I had crossed the same line twice, eyes open, calling it comfort when it was really hunger. Marcus texted at 6, "You okay?" I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then typed, "I don't know," and hit send. 3 dots appeared, vanished, reappeared. Finally, "Take care of yourself today, I'll keep my distance." I should have felt relief. Instead, my chest thudded hollow. I tossed the phone aside and rolled out of bed, feet hitting carpet like they were heavier than yesterday. I scrubbed the hallway doorframe with a magic eraser until my arms shook, trying to remove scuff marks his boot hadn't even left. I washed the tile twice, the scent of bleach making me lightheaded. But the memory still clung, his palm on my thigh, the sharp gasp that tasted like mercy. The house felt too small and too enormous at once, every corner echoing with a ghost of heat. At work, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I botched an invoice, apologized too loudly, flinched when the copier jammed. My coworker Bate asked if I was sick. I blamed the storm's pressure drop. On break, I hid in the supply room and scrolled our message thread, dozens of tiny lifelines. Photos of sunrises, reminders to drink water, jokes about rusted tailpipes. The newest one sat alone at the bottom like a closed door. I started to type, "Thank you for last night," deleted it, tried again with "We need to talk," deleted that too. The blinking cursor felt like an accusation. Driving home, I hit red lights in a row. Each idle moment, I wondered if his truck would appear in the opposite lane. My heart leapt at every dark green Chevy, then crashed when the driver wasn't him. By the time I pulled into my driveway, dusk had fallen and the porch light he'd rewired cast a steady glow across the gravel. I remembered his warning, "You'll wreck me." The thought tasted metallic. Inside, I reheated soup, ate 2 bites, dumped the rest. The spoon clanged in the sink, echoing through the empty kitchen. I caught myself glancing toward the back door, half expecting it to creak open. It didn't. The clock ticked louder with each minute of his absence. I turned on the TV, volume low, some home improvement show where smiling couples knocked down walls and discovered perfect space behind them. I watched until the credits rolled, then sat staring at the blue screen reflection in the window glass. Right after 10, bright lights swept across my living room ceiling. My heart sank, but they kept moving past. I pulled back the curtains just a crack. The rain had come back, soft as mist, creating halos around the street lamps. No truck. I left the curtains open anyway, foolish hope tingling on my skin. Midnight came and went. I crawled into bed and lay stiff, listening to the far-off whisper of car tires on wet roads. Each sound felt like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. 2 whole days passed without seeing him. The quiet became its own thunderstorm, pushing against my chest. I drank coffee in the morning but tasted nothing. In meetings, my thoughts wandered to his hands working on bolts, the vein that popped out when he lifted heavy engine parts. I tried scrolling for distractions, recipes, news stories, but every ad seemed to show a truck or workshop tools. The internet somehow knew what I was yearning for before I did. On the 3rd evening, I discovered his jacket still folded on the hallway bench where he'd left it after shaking off the rain. I pressed it to my face. The smell of engine oil and fresh cedar hit me so hard my legs went weak. Without thinking, I grabbed the jacket and headed for the door, my heart racing like I was taking something precious that didn't belong to me, which I guess I was. His repair shop sat on the outskirts of town. One bright light buzzed over the empty parking lot. The garage doors were shut, but his truck sat running near the fence, windows all steamed up. I parked across the street, turned off my engine, and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. Why was I here? To give back a jacket, or to feel that electric connection again before guilt crushed it? Rain drummed on my windshield, blurring the glow of his tail lights. I stepped out, using the jacket to cover my head. My boots crunched on the gravel, way too loud in the stillness. When I reached his truck, he rolled down the window halfway. Surprise flashed across his face, then turned into deep worry. "You said we needed space," he began, his voice rough and tired. I held up the jacket, rain dripping from my sleeve. This was all I could smell in my house. His eyes went dark for a long moment. Neither of us spoke. Water seeped into my coat collar, cold needles pricking my scalp. Finally, he shut off the engine, opened the door, and stepped out into the drizzle. His hair was already getting darker from the rain. "We can't keep doing this," he said, the jacket forgotten between us. "I know," I whispered, but admitting it didn't slow my racing pulse. He reached for the coat, our fingers touched. Electricity sparked under our damp skin. We both took sharp breaths. He looked like he might step away, then didn't. Instead, he lifted the jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders, pulling the edges close. His hand stayed at my collarbone, thumbs resting against the hollow that still ached from his kiss. Rain peppered us with tiny cold drops against our overheated skin. "Every time I walk away," he said quietly, "I feel like I'm leaving part of myself behind." A truck roared past on the highway, spraying water. Headlights washed over us, then vanished. I realized my own hands had grabbed fistfuls of his wet shirt, holding on like the wind might sweep him away. "This doesn't fix anything," I said, my voice shaking. "But when you're near, it's the only time I don't feel shattered." He closed his eyes, rain streaming down his face. "You make me want things I thought were beyond saving." For a heartbeat, I thought we'd fall into each other right there, gravel and floodlight be damned. Instead, he forced space between us, stepping back until the night air cooled the heat rolling off our bodies. "Go home," he said, his voice torn. "Dry off, sleep." I nodded, my throat tight. He climbed back into his truck, engine coughing to life. I turned to leave but couldn't resist one last look. He sat gripping the wheel, head down like he was praying. I pressed the jacket tighter around me, breathing in its scent, then walked away feeling the cold soak through to my bones. That night, curled under blankets still wearing his coat, I realized longing had become a second heartbeat, steady, painful, impossible to quiet. I drifted in restless sleep where his voice chased away the past and present, everything blurring until I jerked awake, sweat cooling on my skin. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles, matching the turmoil inside me. Morning found me staring at my reflection, eyes ringed dark, mouth swollen from memory. I told myself I was healing, but this might be another kind of wound. Tim knocked on my door the next Thursday, just as thunder rolled over town like heavy furniture being dragged across the sky. I opened to find him holding a real estate flyer, hair slicked from rain, mouth pulled thin. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, water dripping onto the hallway tiles that Patton and I had cleaned together. "Donna said you were thinking about selling," he began, his voice too casual. "Thought we could agree on an agent." The flyer shook in his fingers. That tremor made my stomach drop. Tim never trembled. I asked him to take off his wet coat, but his eyes were already scanning the hallway, catching on the canvas jacket still hanging from the stair rail. Patton's jacket, the one I'd slept in 3 nights straight. Tim's gaze returned to me, sharp and knowing. "That yours?" he asked softly. I swallowed, nodded, the lie stuck in my throat. He shrugged off rainwater, but his shoulders stayed tense. "Guess congratulations are in order," he said. "Didn't take long." Lightning flashed, lighting up both him and the jacket like evidence in a photograph. He took a step closer. "Who is he?" The question felt more like a judgment than curiosity. I opened my mouth, no sound came out. Tim's jaw clenched, eyes glinting with something sharp. You know what, doesn't matter. House sells better empty anyway. He turned, leaving the flyer on my table like a court summons, and walked back into the storm without closing the door. I stood shaking until the thunder faded, then slammed the door harder than I meant to. The flyer fluttered to the floor. Rain gusted under the doorway. I knelt, wiping up water with a towel, realized my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My life wasn't just cracked anymore, it was breaking in clean lines. And Tim's anger was only the first break. Patton texted that evening, "Diner, need coffee." After a double shift, I said yes before my better sense caught up. The bright diner felt like a fishbowl, windows fogged by grilled cheese steam, neon sign buzzing red on the glass. Patton sat across from me, grease under his nails, exhaustion in his eyes. We talked in low voices about car repairs and nothing, both avoiding the bruise Tim had left between my ribs. Halfway through pie, Tim's truck screeched into the lot. I saw the headlights sweep across the booths, recognized the dent in the fender before my brain processed the danger. "Stay here," I said, sliding from the vinyl seat. Patton followed anyway, hand on my elbow. Wind slapped rain sideways as we stepped into the parking lot, neon spilling pink across puddles. Tim stalked toward us, rain plastering hair to his forehead. "So this is him," he spat, pointing at Patton. "Your mechanic." Shock punched the breath from my lungs. Patton stepped between us, palms out. "Take it easy, man." Tim laughed, a brittle sound. "Easy, you break up a marriage, then ask me to take it easy." "Marriage was broken before I showed up," Patton said quietly. Tim's fist swung fast and sloppy. It caught Patton's cheek, splitting skin. I screamed. Patton stumbled but didn't hit back. He just wiped blood with his sleeve, eyes dark with control. A waitress yelled from the doorway that police were coming. Tim shook rain from his hand, eyes wide like he'd woken from a dream, then backed toward his truck. Tires squealed. Tail lights disappeared into the night. I turned to Patton, blood already streaking through rain on his jaw. He winced under the diner light while I pressed napkins to the cut. Sirens wailed in the distance, but he shook his head. "No police," he muttered. "I'm fine." My own pulse hammered so hard my vision spotted. Tears mixed with rain on his jacket as I whispered sorry over and over. But he just kept saying, "Not your fault," like a prayer to keep me standing. I drove him to his shop. Thunder had drifted east, leaving the sky raw and buzzing with leftover energy. Inside the garage, fluorescent strips flickered. He sat on a stool